Let's get started. You enter the cathedral and climb the narrow stairs to the bell tower. Below you, the townspeople are just beginning to gather in the square. Their faces are pale and drawn, their eyes fearful. The executioner stands ready beside the scaffold, his face grim, his hands resting on the axe handle. The air is thick with the scent of dust and decay. Among them, a journal lies open, revealing cryptic notes and sketches. Then your eyes catch a glimpse of something more sinister. A series of anatomical drawings, precise and detailed, depicting not just a body's structure, but something more, something unsettling. These aren't just diagrams of human anatomy. They show the intricate network of veins and arteries leading to and from the heart, the very essence of life pulsing through the body. But there's more. Interspersed among the anatomical drawings are sketches of execution scenes, of blood-soaked scaffolds and severed heads held aloft, each drawing imbued with a macabre energy. It becomes clear these illustrations aren't merely artistic rendering. They are a testament to a horrifying reality. The blood that courses through our veins comes not just from the earth, but from sacrifice. The very life force depicted in these drawings is sustained by an unseen, terrifying cause. You feel a chill crawl up your spine as you realize the depth of what you've stumbled upon. As the condemned man mounts the steps to the scaffold, a hush falls over the crowd. But the narrative doesn't end there. Haunting fragments of memories intrude upon the written word, whispering even louder. Is it the innocent blood of the hanged boy? The feverish desperation of the dying nobleman's daughter? Or the chilling legacy of Dr. Zollner himself? The answer, my friend, lies within the blood-soaked pages of history. It is a tale whispered through the ages, a chilling reminder that sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden in plain sight, and the line between salvation and damnation can be as thin as a drop of blood. The taste of coppery blood on your tongue, the phantom feeling of an axe's edge against your skin, the haunting echo of screams in your ears. Each of these fragments is a clue, a piece of the puzzle that makes up the story of the Crimson Remedy. He is young, barely more than a boy, and he trembles as he lays his head on the block. The executioner's axe gleams in the sunlight. The crowd gasps as the blade falls. Blood splatters and the boy's head rolls across the platform, bouncing off the base of the scaffold. The executioner cuts off the head, holds it up for all to see, and then, to your horror, places the still warm head in a silver chalice. The crowd recoils, but you are transfixed. The executioner descends the scaffold and approaches the crowd, extending the chalice for all to see. "Drink," he cries, "and be healed." The people hesitate, fear and hope battling in their eyes, but eventually they come forward to take the blood-filled chalice. You awaken with a start. Your heart pounds, your skin clammy. The dream, vivid and disturbing, clings to you like a shroud. Suddenly, the bell tower seems to close, the scaffold too high, the blood too warm. Was it just a dream? You ask yourself, clutching at your chest as if to stop the phantom pounding of your heart. Outside, the crowd begins to stir. The square, once silent, is now filled with the murmur of voices. You hurry down the tower stairs, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the bell tower. As you reach the bottom, you find yourself face to face with Dr. Venus. His eyes are dark and intense, his gaze unwavering. "You sought me," he says, his voice raspy. "I have found you. You try to speak, but your voice fails you." Zollner takes a step closer. "You wish to know the secret of life and death," he continues, his eyes boring into yours. "Then follow me." Without another word, he turns and walks away, leaving you standing frozen in your tracks. You find yourself in a dimly lit chamber, shelves lined with ancient books and strange instruments. The story unfolds through a series of diary entries, surgical notes, and recovered letters. And as the tale draws to a close, one question reverberates in your mind. Whose blood do you carry? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. For centuries, there has been a persistent rumor that during the Black Death, people turned to a rather drastic form of treatment. Blood transfusions from healthy individuals to sick individuals. This may sound weird and unpleasant today, but it was considered a legitimate treatment up until the late 20th century, an uneasy stillness that came not from peace, but from too many unanswered prayers. The sick no longer filled the churches, they filled the basements. In Graz, a nun cured of leprosy through the same method began compulsively dissecting birds and insects, arranging their organs in spirals across her cell wall. There, he claimed, the veil between flesh and spirit was thinner. and was herself dying when offered a dose of noble blood from a recently executed aristocrat, guilty of political sedition. After recovering, Elsbeth began speaking with unusual eloquence. She adopted aristocratic mannerisms, quoting Tacitus and speaking fluent Greek languages she'd never learned. Her handwriting changed. She disowned her family, burned her husband's belongings, and took to wearing a signet ring she claimed had been hers in a past life. Worse, she began to petition for the release of prisoners accused of treason. She said they were her kind. Within a year, she was burned for witchcraft. He no longer saw blood as medicine. He saw it as memory. Rome declared the practice sanguinum and Siena cult perversion of divine order. But it was too late. The practice had taken root, not just in medicine, but in society. To question it was to invite death, or worse, sickness. Some cities banned public executions altogether, fearing what would follow. Others hid the gallows behind walls. But the blood still flowed smuggled, stolen, and sold like holy relics. And only it was those closest to death who demanded it most. They were not evil. They were desperate. That is the most frightening truth of all. And in the heart of this crimson trade, in a stone cell lined with books and bones, Dr. Zollner wrote his final sentence before disappearing forever. We have mistaken the memory of life for life itself. And what we take in, we become. It is not the body that heals, he wrote in his final surviving letter. It is the memory of the body before death. The blood carries this memory, but memory is not neutral. It is not kind. What did he mean? Scholars today dismiss it as metaphor. But within Zollner's remaining manuscripts smudged with wine, or perhaps blood, he described something chilling. He wrote that the more a person consumed the blood of another, the less they became themselves. The boundaries blurred, thoughts leaked, desires twisted. The soul, if it existed, became porous. He gave it a name, transference. Not the symbolic kind between healer and patient. No, Zollner meant literal transfer, the passing of something essential, invisible, yet potent. Some fragment of the condemned, clinging to their final fluid, embedding itself in a new host. Like smoke and cloth, like mold and breath. The patients who consumed the most often began to change. One wealthy merchant began to exhibit kleptomania after drinking from a thief. A magistrate cured of tremors developed sudden, unprovoked rage as his blood donor had been a convicted wife killer. A scholar treated for melancholia became obsessed with drawing labyrinths, refusing to speak except in backwards Latin. His source, a mad poet who died quoting Virgil and biting his own tongue. But not all changes were so dramatic. Many were subtle, a shift in handwriting, a sudden preference for foods previously despised, nightmares that didn't feel like dreams more, like memories that weren't theirs. But blood consumption wasn't just happening among the wealthy elite. By 1560, over 2,000 people in Vienna alone were regular consumers. Many had taken up the habit for simple colds or stomach aches. Some sought to improve their minds. They believed a child's blood could sharpen their memory. Others wanted to cheat death. The richer they were, the more they paid. The poorer they were, the more desperate they became. And in those vaulted spaces, beneath candle wax and mildew, they waited for their deliverance, not from God, but from the blade. The demand for blood had outstripped supply. Executions, once a public affair, became nightly occurrences. Quiet, efficient. The condemned no longer walked to the scaffold. They were dragged. Their bodies weren't buried. They were processed. Veins open. Life collected. Not a drop wasted. Somewhere along the way, death became logistic. What had started as medical desperation had evolved into a quiet industry when kept behind locked doors. Protected by wealth and sustained by belief. The poor still died, coughing in the streets, but the rich drank. But what is really interesting about the plague doctors who practiced this is that some people believe these doctors actually resorted to murdering people in order to harvest their blood. After her first taste of young blood, her bones stopped aching. Her appetite returned. By her third dose, she was dancing. By her 10th, she no longer slept. There were rumors that she had begun to speak in a strange voice at night, a deeper voice, one that knew secrets about the servants, about the house, about her husband's sins. The children grew afraid of her. Her maids began quitting. One, before vanishing, wrote a letter claiming she'd seen the lady drinking from a cut on her own arm, laughing. When Wolf was found dead months later, her eyes had been removed not by another, but by her own hand. Her fingers were found clutched around the bloody orbs. She had carved words into the stone floor with a fork. No more light, only the river. It was not an isolated case. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back in the winter of 1543, Vienna was a city veiled in silence. In a stone manor atop the Schottering lived Edeltraud, wife of a banker, mother of 3, once declared terminal by 6 physicians. In Heidelberg, a boy at 13 who had survived typhoid thanks to vital blood tore out his own tongue with his own teeth. Dr. Zollner, now aging, was no longer a physician. He had retreated to a crumbling monastery in the woods. Beyond, Melk Zollner's most disturbing case involved a young widow named Elsa, who had lost her husband to a fever by now. The church could no longer look away. Welcome to my channel. By 1551, the thirst had become institutional. What had once slithered through the darkened cellars of physicians now sat openly in ledgers and decrees. There were not enough crimes to match the hunger, not enough executions to fuel the appetites of the dying nor the greedy. In a hidden archive beneath the ruins of a Viennese monastery, a letter survives. The church had issued new condemnations, more forceful this time but selectively enforced. Bishops quietly took part in controlled experiment. Monasteries took in orphans and assigned them numbers. In Rome, a cardinal rumored to be on the brink of death stunned the curia by walking unaided into mass. Days after receiving a shipment marked from Saxony Premium, they said it was prayer, but his hands trembled and his eyes never blinked. The trade routes changed to accommodate the need. Caravans no longer carried only spices and silks, they carried flesh. Sedated, sometimes chained, the life-givers were moved like livestock across kingdoms, and with them traveled another kind of sickness. Not one of the body, but of the soul. It is addressed from a Magister rank, a mid-ranking physician, to a colleague in Amsterdam. The guests toasted his purity. He did not cry. He simply stared at the wall and whispered something in a language no one recognized. But a single page survived found, clutched in the hand of a dying monk who crawled from the fire. It read, "The blood remembers, but now it begins to speak." What did it mean? Perhaps it was metaphor. Perhaps it was madness. But then came the dreams. The drinkers, those who consumed blood regularly, began to report visions, not hallucination, shared dreams, entirely identical. Fields of ash, rivers running red, a figure without a face, reaching out with hands made of smoke. They saw themselves buried alive, whispering secrets in a tongue no one knew. They called it the voice in the veins. It would come at night. It would call their names. And always it would ask the same thing. Who else will you drink? A week later, every guest at that dinner was dead. Some say it was poison. Others say the blood had turned, that it had become something else, but not in any way God intended, because that was the truth behind the glamour. The blood was changing, not chemically, no, not in ways the crude alchemy of the age could measure. But those who drank it, especially in excess, began to display traits that defied. A baroness in Dresden stopped aging. It was said, but her hair turned white, her eyes black, and she began speaking in rhyme, compulsively. A general in Spain became obsessed with darkness, refusing to be seen by daylight, claiming the sun screamed at him. A nun in Cologne, cured of palsy through transfusion, began bleeding spontaneously from her palms, except the blood was not hers. It was from a man executed years prior. He writes, "They are not mere vessels. They dream, they cry out in sleep. They speak the names of those who have drunk from them, though they've never met. I've had one whisper my own wife's secrets. Another bled onto the floor and traced my initials in it. There is something watching through them, something old." And so the condemned were replaced by the designated. They were not criminals. They were not always unwilling. They were the a new class of human, born of bureaucracy and desperation, drawn from the orphanages, the debtor prisons, the conquered villages, signed away by distant fathers, sold by starving mothers, promised coin they would never see. Marked with an inked cross behind the ear, they were kept in compounds outside city walls, fed well, kept clean, but never educated. They were told they were sacred, that their suffering gave life, that they were chosen. They were bled weekly, not to death at first, just enough, just a little. But as demand grew, so did the quotas. In Salzburg, records show one young man aged 15 bled 32 times in 1 year. He died in winter, teeth gone from rot, veins collapsed. His name is unknown. He was referred to only as Batch 1 for sick. In Bavaria, noble households declared quotas not for wheat, not for wine, but for blood. Weekly deliveries, measured in ounces. Receipts signed in ink and sealed in wax. It was no longer a secret. The elite had stopped hiding their indulgence. Blood drinking had become a rite, an indulgence cloaked in the language of medicine and renewal. Dukes, bishops, and scholars dined together, swirling red in crystal goblets and discussing dosage like blood from a violinist was said to calm the nerves, blood from a blacksmith to strengthen the bones, blood from a virgin, a miracle, if one could afford it. But the condemned were no longer enough. Not all were silent. Still, the blood flowed. In London, a visiting physician wrote of attending a dinner where a living cup was presented, a young boy, no older than 12, whose wrist was pricked and whose blood was passed around like port. Dr. Zollner was long gone by then. His monastery burned to ash in 1547, and with it, most of his final writings. By the close of the 16th century, Europe no longer spoke of the Crimson Remedy, not in the halls of medicine, not in the courts, not even in whispers, behind locked doors. The age of blood had ended not with fire or decree, but with forgetting, or rather, the illusion of forgetting. The archives were sealed, the compounds dismantled, the blood ledgers burned. Monasteries that had once stored vials now stored only dust. Physicians who had once dined on miracles either vanished or died screaming. And the few that remained insisted it had all been exaggeration, folk superstition, misdiagnosed hysteria. But the walls remembered, the earth remembered, and most of all, the blood remembered, because it had never truly stopped. Each skull bore a symbol burned into the bone. The spot at the center of the chamber, a stone basin, dry for centuries, until the day it wasn't. In Paris, a series of disappearances near a noble estate led to the discovery of a hidden cellar. Inside, 4 iron chairs, stained black, chains embedded in the floor. A ledger listing dates, names, volumes. He left the order the next morning and never spoke again. And all had converged generation by generation in to a single person. A young woman, alive and unaware, only carved, until the day he died. Spiral's eyes, names long erased. Her hair was white, her eyes impossibly black. She could recite the names of every executioner in Vienna from memory, though she had never left her village. She played music no one had taught her. She never fell ill. Animals fled her presence. The last entry, dated only months before discovery, simply read, "He no longer needs the blood to dream." She is the choir. Every voice ever drunk still sings. In Venice, a child born during a red moon spoke fluent Latin within hours of birth, citing passages from a lost medical treatise by Zollner himself. The child never blinked, never cried, died after 3 days, its veins full of ash. And in the heart of Prague, beneath the cathedral, an ossuary was uncovered, bones stacked with deliberate care. A monk who entered alone found the basin filled, not with blood, but with memory. Visions flooded his mind of hangings of silver cups, of voices speaking in perfect unison. Inside a thick red liquid, still warm. The apothecary, curious, dropped it onto a silver plate and watched as the blood rearranged itself into a perfect image of his face. But perhaps the most haunting account came from a physician's apprentice in Lubeck, who claimed to have met a man with no shadow. The man said he was a blood tracer, last of his kind, the ledgers marked as fictional, and the phrase sanguinis vita has all but vanished from memory. Some believe there are families wealthy protective who continue the tradition in private, that they do not bleed anymore, but breathe, that certain lineages exist not for glory or name, but for memory, that the condemned still live just beneath the skin of their devourers. He had mapped 117 lineages of condemned blood through Europe's noble families. She lived in a quiet manner, by a lake. The man watched her for 3 days. On the 4th, she turned to him and said, "You have my father's hands." He never approached again. The apprentice asked him what it meant to us she possessed. "Was she the end?" The man replied. "She is not the end. In shadows cast by faces, you almost recognize. He vanished that winter. Familiar." But the legends persisted. The voice in the veins, it is said, still hums beneath the floors of certain asylums. And then there is the case of the mirror blood. In 1621, an apothecary in Bremen received a sealed vial from an anonymous courier and then opened its mouth and spoke. "What you take, you must carry. What you carry, you must become." The apothecary died 2 days later. His blood crystallized. His heart never failed. Today, the official records deny all of it. There is no mention of Zollner in public history. The compounds are listed as proof, but some say that if you wander deep enough into the woods outside Melt and dig beneath the old stones, you'll find a door with no hinges. Knock once, and nothing happened. Knock twice, and you'll hear breathing. Knock 3 times, and the door will open not to a room, but to a memory not your own. And something inside will ask you, in a voice you've never heard but somehow recognize, whose blood do you carry? Because blood is never just blood. It is history. It is hunger. It is the echo of every hand that ever reached for life and found only the cold edge of the night. And it remembers you. They buried the ledgers. They sealed the vials. They burned the names. But the blood, it remained. From orphan compounds to noble crypts. From forgotten manors to whispers in asylum, wastrasses of sanguinis vita still linger. Not in books, but in flesh. In dreams. History tells us the age of blood-drinking medicine is over. That we are wiser now. Safer. But listen closely, and you'll hear it. The faint hum beneath your skin. The memory you never lived. The voice you never spoke whispering something ancient. Because in the end, the question isn't whether it happened. It's whether it ever stopped. And if you feel a chill, a sudden hunger, don't worry. It's only your blood. Remembering